The morning sun filtered through the curtains of a cozy suburban home. Sarah, a gentle woman in her late 30s with kind, thoughtful eyes and soft brown hair tied loosely, sat at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. Across the room, Bailey, her golden retriever, stretched out by the window, her golden coat shimmering in the soft light. Bailey's ears perked up at the faint rustle of leaves outside. Sarah chuckled softly, glancing at her loyal companion. "What is it, girl?" she asked, her voice light with affection. Bailey's sharp, watchful gaze didn't waver from the window, her body still, like a statue carved from gold. It was moments like this that reminded Sarah of Bailey's unyielding devotion, a protector through and through. The peaceful morning was interrupted by the distant sound of footsteps outside. Bailey rose to her feet, her tail still but her ears alert. Sarah dismissed the noise as a jogger passing by, but Bailey's unease lingered. Her soulful eyes flickered with an instinct Sarah had come to trust. For now, Sarah patted her head reassuringly, whispering, "You're always looking out for me, huh?" But Bailey's gaze didn't soften. As Sarah returned to her coffee, the golden retriever took her place by the front door, her posture steady and watchful. Bailey knew something was out there, something Sarah couldn't yet see. The quiet hum of the morning grew tense as Bailey remained by the front door, her body stiff and alert. Sarah noticed her behavior and frowned, setting her coffee down. "Bailey, what's going on?" she asked, walking over. Bailey let out a low, almost imperceptible growl, her eyes fixed on the door. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't like Bailey. She was usually calm and playful, never this rigid or intense. Sarah knelt down beside her, running her fingers through Bailey's soft golden fur in an attempt to calm her. But Bailey didn't relax. Her instincts screamed that something wasn't right. Then came the sound, faint at first but unmistakable, a soft rustling near the side of the house. Sarah's breath caught. "It's probably just the wind," she muttered to herself, but her voice lacked conviction. Bailey let out a sharp bark, startling Sarah. She moved to peek through the window, her fingers trembling slightly as she pulled back the curtain. Through the glass, she saw nothing but the gently swaying trees in the backyard. Yet Bailey's behavior didn't change. She paced back and forth near the door, her every movement deliberate and precise, as though preparing for something Sarah couldn't see. "All right, girl," Sarah whispered, her tone more serious now. "Let's check it out together." She reached for her phone and opened the door cautiously, with Bailey by her side, her loyal companion, standing guard. The cool morning air greeted them as Sarah stepped out onto the porch, her slippers crunching against the gravel. Bailey moved with her, each step deliberate, her body tense like a coiled spring. The golden retriever's sharp eyes scanned the yard, her ears twitching at the faintest sound. "Bailey, you're really making me nervous," Sarah said, her voice wavering as she tried to inject some humor into the situation. But the unease in her chest was growing. She followed Bailey's gaze toward the side of the house, where the bushes rustled slightly, though the wind had stilled. "Probably a raccoon," Sarah muttered to herself, trying to rationalize it. But Bailey's low growl was unrelenting, a sound Sarah rarely heard from her gentle dog. The tension in the air was palpable. Then, from the corner of her eye, Sarah caught movement. A shadow darted past the edge of the yard, too large and deliberate to be an animal. Her stomach dropped. Bailey barked sharply, her stance rigid as she fixed her attention on the area near the back gate. "Hello? Is someone there?" Sarah called, her voice firm but trembling slightly. She clutched her phone tightly in her hand, her finger hovering over the emergency dial. Silence. The only sound was the soft rustling of leaves. Bailey moved closer to the gate, her growls growing louder. Sarah followed cautiously, her heart pounding. "Stay close, Bailey," she whispered, her voice shaking. She leaned forward, squinting to see through the thin veil of branches near the gate. Suddenly, the bushes parted, and a figure emerged. A man dressed in dark clothing, his hood pulled low over his face. Sarah froze, her breath catching in her throat. The man stopped in his tracks, clearly startled to see her standing there. Bailey erupted into a frenzy of barking, stepping protectively in front of Sarah. The man hesitated, his movements unsure, as Bailey bared her teeth, her once gentle demeanor now replaced by fierce determination. "Get back!" Sarah shouted, her voice steadier now as adrenaline surged through her veins. The man took a step back, clearly unnerved by Bailey's aggressive stance. Without warning, Bailey lunged forward, her bark sharp and commanding, sending a clear message. She would protect her owner at all costs. The man hesitated for a moment longer before turning and running, disappearing into the trees beyond the yard. Sarah's knees buckled as relief and fear washed over her. Bailey stood her ground, her eyes fixed on the spot where the intruder had vanished, her growls slowly subsiding. Sarah dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Bailey, burying her face in the dog's fur. "You saved me," she whispered, her voice breaking. Bailey nuzzled her gently, her tail wagging ever so slightly as if to say, "I'll always protect you." Sarah quickly dialed the police, her voice trembling as she reported the encounter. All the while, Bailey remained at her side, her presence a steady reminder of the unwavering loyalty and love that had just saved Sarah from a potentially dangerous situation. The wailing of police sirens shattered the eerie silence, growing louder as they approached Sarah's house. Sarah stood on her porch, her arms wrapped tightly around herself for comfort, while Bailey sat vigilantly by her side, her golden fur catching the soft glow of the porch light. Two officers stepped out of their cruiser, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of them asked, his tone calm but concerned. Sarah nodded, her voice trembling as she said, "I'm fine, thanks to Bailey." She glanced down at her loyal dog, who looked up at her as if to say, "I'm just doing my job." As Sarah recounted the night's events, Bailey remained alert, her gaze occasionally darting toward the yard where the shadowy figure had disappeared. The officers listened attentively, taking notes while scanning the property for signs of the intruder. "I didn't get a good look at him," Sarah admitted, her voice heavy with frustration. But Bailey? She knew something was wrong right away. One officer knelt down to Bailey's level, extending a cautious hand. "You've got a good protector here," he said with a small smile. Bailey sniffed his hand before offering a quick wag of her tail, her demeanor calm but still watchful. As the officers conducted their search, Sarah retreated inside, Bailey at her heels. The house felt quieter now, but the unease lingered. Sarah locked the doors and windows, double-checking every latch, her hands trembling slightly. In the living room, Sarah sank onto the couch, pulling Bailey close. The dog rested her head on Sarah's lap, her body warm and reassuring. "I don't know what I'd do without you," Sarah murmured, stroking Bailey's soft ears. A knock at the door startled her, but it was just one of the officers returning to update her. "We didn't find anyone, but we'll increase patrols in the area," he said. "If you notice anything unusual, call us right away." Sarah nodded, thanking them again before closing the door. The weight of the night began to sink in, and she leaned against the wall, taking a deep breath. She looked down at Bailey, who was still by her side, her eyes filled with quiet understanding. "You're incredible, you know that?" Sarah said, her voice soft but filled with gratitude. Bailey tilted her head slightly, her golden eyes reflecting the affection they shared. As the night wore on, Sarah set up a makeshift bed in the living room, wanting to stay close to Bailey. They lay side by side, the glow of a small lamp casting a warm light over the room. The events of the evening played over in Sarah's mind, but every time fear crept in, she glanced at Bailey. The dog's steady breathing and calm presence were a reminder of the bond they shared. A bond that had not only saved her life, but brought a newfound sense of security and love. With a whispered, "Good night, Bailey," Sarah finally closed her eyes, the weight of the day easing just slightly. Bailey shifted closer, her body curled protectively against Sarah's side. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a golden glow on the living room. Bailey stretched and yawned, her tail thumping softly against the floor as Sarah stirred awake beside her. For a brief moment, the fear of the previous night felt distant, replaced by the warmth of a new day. Sarah sat up slowly, her hand instinctively resting on Bailey's back. "Good morning, hero," she said with a small smile. Bailey looked up at her, her eyes bright and full of love, as if understanding the sentiment. Determined not to let fear rule her life, Sarah decided to take Bailey for their usual morning walk. As they stepped outside, the crisp air carried the scent of pine and earth. The neighborhood was calm, the streets bathed in soft light, and the distant hum of birds filled the air. Bailey walked proudly by Sarah's side, her ears perked up in alert. The world seemed safer with her there. A steady presence in the face of uncertainty. Neighbors they passed waved, and one even stopped to pet Bailey, remarking, "She's such a good dog. You're lucky to have her." Sarah smiled warmly, her hand resting on Bailey's head. "I really am," she replied, her voice filled with gratitude. Later that day, Sarah decided to reward Bailey for her bravery. She prepared Bailey's favorite meal, a hearty mix of chicken and rice, and placed it in her bowl with a smile. "You've earned this, girl," Sarah said, watching as Bailey wagged her tail excitedly. After lunch, Sarah sat on the floor with Bailey, her hand brushing through the dog's soft fur. "You know, Bailey," she began, her voice quiet, "I never thought I could feel this safe again, but you've changed everything." Bailey leaned into Sarah's touch, her tail wagging gently. It was as though she understood every word, a silent affirmation of the bond they shared. As evening fell, Sarah lit a few candles and curled up on the couch with a book. Bailey lay at her feet, her head resting on her paws, her presence steady and comforting. The shadows of the room felt less imposing, the echoes of fear replaced by an overwhelming sense of gratitude.